As you can see from all the display in the foyer and the bulletin, if you did not already know, this is the launch, 1 week delayed, of our Hearts of Generosity campaign. And we're going to be talking about that, about this important time in the story of North Point and the things that God has for us this morning and for the next few weeks. So if you came in and did not pick up, there's an envelope for you with your name on it. And there's others available if there's not one with your name on it, if you're like an infrequent or first-time attender. And this gives you all the information, the printed information about the campaign, what we're doing to do it, why, questions and answers, and so forth. And there's even a cool pin with Hearts of Generosity on it. I love pins. I always take them when I go to doctor's offices. It's probably a sin, but... So I just urge you to read those and be sure that you get it. If you haven't got it, you can pick it up at the center table on the way out. Very briefly from the bulletin, just to point out that 2 of our ministries to hurting people, both within the congregation and in the community, Divorce Care and Grief Share, are underway or soon to get underway, and the information is there for you or for someone you know that perhaps could really benefit from being with others in times of loss, whether a relationship or a loved one through death. So please read that. Note too, the sister church team, that is our mission partnership in India, in South Africa with the Aliwal North and Maranatha congregations. That group that prays for and oversees that relationship invites anyone who wishes to come to pray with them and see what they're about. And you can read the rest at your leisure. And as you know, as we've been talking about in print and in certain groups for a while, but session elders and I have been thinking and praying for a long time about this important transition year for North Point. With my retirement in July, and the search for a new pastor immediately following, the session recognized that this is an opportune time to lay the groundwork financially for a new era of growth and of ministry impact by significantly reducing our mortgage debt. Our present mortgage is due for renewal in 2020. By significantly reducing the amount refinanced and by qualifying for a favorable interest rate, we'll be able in the years to come to direct more of your giving directly to ministry and staffing within these walls, within our community and also beyond. And I furthermore believe that such a commitment to stewardship for the sake of ministry will be very appealing, will be very striking to any potential great candidate for pastor at North Point. They're going to see that this is a congregation that really cares about ministry. They're not on cruise control. They're not just sitting around enjoying fellowship together, but they really care about their community, and they're sacrificially providing that we can devote as much of our resources as possible there. So with this in mind, Session voted to conduct a 3-year capital fundraising program to help us pay down our debt. And we're getting help from a company called Kiaros, which is a Christian fundraising company. It's the same company, by the way, that helped us raise funds to build this church some years ago, and it was successful beyond anyone's imagination. It was fantastic. So today, we're introducing the Hearts of Generosity campaign. As I said, I encourage you to read carefully through the campaign material for a full explanation of what we're doing and why. But I hope that you'll catch the true vision of the campaign, which is ensuring that we have a vibrant, ongoing, church-wide culture of generosity that will position North Point for great success in years to come. Starting today and for the next 4 weeks, we're going to focus on preparing ourselves spiritually as a congregation to respond to a challenge and opportunity that is totally achievable, I believe, through heartfelt generosity. And now to kind of fill in some more details and give us a little context to this great moment in our life, I'm going to ask Tom Curran, appointed by session to head up the steering committee of Hearts of Generosity, and working with Jennifer Perro, come on up, Tom, our generous consultant, and he's going to share some more details with you.
Thank you. As Pastor Mike mentioned, our capital campaign 10 years ago was very successful, extremely successful, but it blessed our church in many ways besides just financially. Now, after all this planning for this one, I'm really eager to get started with these 5 weeks. Now, I didn't like, the kickoff being delayed a week due to snow, and also, like Joel and Pastor Mike and maybe the rest of you here, missed gathering for Sunday worship last week. But do you know what also bothered me, kept me from sleeping in that Sunday morning, enjoying the beautiful scenery? It was the nagging thought that our automatic thermostats were all set to start heating this building up at 7 a.m. Sunday morning. I'm on the finance team, and I know what our winter heating bills are, and I'm a little bit cheap. But I also know all the many good ministries in our church that could use the money that would have been spent on heating up this building when there was no scheduled service or Sunday schools. Now, my car couldn't make it up the driveway, so I got on my boots and my gloves, and I walked up to church, and I set the thermostats to stay at 60 degrees. Now, saving... That's how I roll. Now, saving on the heating bills really felt good. Do you know what will also feel really good? Significantly reducing another expense that takes our resources away from ministries, those monthly mortgage loan interest payments. There are better things that we can do with this money. Now, as Pastor Mike mentioned, these packets are out there. I already see that many of you have them. Please, if you haven't, pick them up on your way out the door. And there's a campaign packet for everyone and some extras just in case. Now, in them, you'll see the wonderful brochure regarding the campaign. And there's also I think a pretty well thought up question and answer sheet that published by Craig, and thank you, Craig, for doing that. There's also information that's going to be on our website. The Q&A sheet will explain the financial goal of this campaign, but it'll also tell you about another goal, a very important goal of this campaign, and that is 100% participation by our church members. So please be here for all 5 of these campaign Sundays, when we'll be all challenged to commit together to this Hearts of Generosity campaign. Not equal giving, but shared sacrifice. If there's any questions that doesn't cover, please let me know. Now, you also find in there a commitment card. And this is a very important card, and this will be very helpful for you. You will need this card, because this card helps you sort through your giving options for this over and above ask for the 3 years of this campaign. Now, this is a big challenge for us as individuals and families and as a church. But we've handled big challenges in the past. As one of our members, Carol Moline, knows, Carol, if you can come up. Now, Carol has been with North Point Church, from the planning stages, before this building was here, before Pastor Mike arrived, before our first worship service over in the high school across the street. 20 years ago, when North Point Church was still just a gleam in a Pastor Jeff Chandler's eye, I think. So, Carol, good to see you. So Carol, you were in a pretty well-established, come on over this way, pretty well-established, comfortable congregation, Central Kitsap Presbyterian Church. And what motivated you and others from that church to come up here and try and start a new church, to jump to that challenge, what was it? You know this.
Okay. Well, Paul and I like challenges, and we had lived in Houston in the early 70s, and they needed a new church on the 1960 road. If you've ever been to Houston, you know where that is. And we decided to help them. And that church today has over 2,000 members and is very vibrant.
Yes.
It's a wonderful thing.
So you wanted to try that again, maybe?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I just remember all that you did and all the details and all the fussiness to get things started here. But 10 years later, when North Point Church was a little more established, and then Session voted to ask everybody for another over and above give so that we could build this building. Well, you were retired then, and this is another big challenge in front of you. What were you thinking back then?
Well, we were excited about the new prospects of a building, and now you see what a wonderful facility we have. We did something exciting. We walked as a congregation over from the high school to this building site where there were just studs on the walls, and we signed the studs with either blessings, scriptures, prayers, our name, the date. I know I signed right back there. So this church was certainly built on faith.
Oh, wow, and just it's behind all the drywall there and just in the bones of our church. Well, now it's 10 years after that campaign, and now what are your thoughts and Roger's thoughts? I know you're both thinking about this as North Point Church enters its third decade. And Pastor Mike, we're looking at a transition now at pastor, and we're starting a new challenge here. So what are your thoughts about this new challenge? Carol?
Well, we're excited about the challenge, and Roger and I will prayerfully consider giving to this campaign. We support our church in Nebraska, where we live part-time, and this church. But North Point is my church.
Oh, thank you, Carol. Thank you, and thank you. Pastor Mike?
Thank you, Tom, and Carol, thanks very much. How fun to be involved from the very beginning on this great project, as you have been. Well, I think quite often about the idea that there was a time when North Point didn't exist. And all the churches, there was a time when not a single one of these churches existed. But because people dreamed and they envisioned and they prayed and they asked God and they opened themselves up to hearts of generosity, these churches were built and ministries began, and this community has been incredibly impacted. Not just Poulsbo, but all of Kitsap County over these last years of new churches arising, coming out of the vision and commitment of people. That's how God chooses to work. We are his agents. We are the means by which God physically gets things done in this world to grow his kingdom. And I can't think of a more needy time in my life than the place our country is in today, of just being totally confused and lost and really needing to hear once again in a fresh and new and meaningful way what the gospel of Jesus Christ is all about. So good for us to be able to be part of God's work. And you do that as you faithfully give. And the giving of your material resources, as in the Old Testament, the giving of crops that grew and the animals that they depended upon, was a statement of faith in God, that when we gave in faith, he would provide and take care of us, and he always does. So may God bless you and demonstrate his faithfulness to you as you give. Will the ushers please come?
As I went down to the river to pray,
Today, and for the next 4 weeks, we are going to prepare our hearts through worship, through prayer, through teaching, through testimony, and conversations within our families to respond with generous hearts to this important moment in North Point's history. Our congregation, as we've been talking about, is approaching a new chapter in its life with a new leader and new opportunities for growth and development as a congregation, building on the good foundation that has been laid. And we want to meet this moment with a good plan, with prepared hearts and a generous response. To do so, we must first recognize the importance of the moment, and I'm going to talk with you about that this morning. As we've noted before, the Bible uses 2 Greek words to translate the idea of time. One word is the word chronos, which speaks of the passing of time, day by day, year by year. In chronos time, North Point is 20 years old, a young adult. But another word, Kiaros, speaks of the importance of time, the significance of time. There are some moments, some Kiaros moments that have special significance, which we need to recognize and respond to. Now, a common phrase which expresses the idea of Kiaros moment is the phrase tipping point. In Malcolm Gladwell's popular book, The Tipping Point, he defines a tipping point, we would say a Kiaros moment, as a critical point in a process by which significant change takes place. I believe that we are at such a point now as we approach the search for a new pastor, a refinance of our mortgage, and the opportunity to direct more of our giving towards ministry. Carol's testimony a few minutes ago illustrates the fact that there have been 2 previous Kiaros moments in the history of North Point. The first one, 20 years ago, came about as some leaders at the Central Kitsap Presbyterian Church in Silverdale began thinking and praying about reaching out to people who would not ordinarily darken the door of a Presbyterian church, or any church for that matter. And these leaders were motivated by their vision of Jesus' command to bear witness to him to people everywhere, believing, as Paul wrote to the Corinthians, that we are Christ's ambassadors, that God is making his appeal to our neighbors, to this world, through us. And they were also inspired by Paul's creativity and flexibility in his mission to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. He said, yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share its blessings. And so, after brainstorming and much prayer, a plan was conceived. The leaders decided to add an additional worship service in a new location in Paulsbo. This service would be less liturgical and formal and more contemporary and informal. It would be a place where everyone would feel comfortable, everyone would be welcome to come as they are. The new congregation would still be considered part of the Silverdale Church and would be overseen by the same session and operating under the same budget. The associate pastor in Silverdale at the time, Jeff Chandler, would become the campus pastor in Paulsbo, and the Silverdale congregation would fund the endeavor through their yearly budget. And anyone from the congregation in Silverdale who wished to go with Jeff to Paulsbo were encouraged to follow God's nudging of them and go. Of course, they needed a place to meet. There's not a lot of rentable, suitable places up here, but it turns out that the North Kitsap High School was available right across the street from 4.5 acres of wooded property that just happened to be owned by the Seattle Presbytery. This land. And so this vision, this plan, and the generous response of the congregation in Silverdale proved to be a Kiaros moment. It was a decision that was made that had significant consequences to follow. Under Jeff's leadership, a new worshiping congregation took root and began to grow in Poulsbo. And then after 5 years, a surprise, a disheartening surprise. Jeff Chandler left North Point to pursue a doctoral program. And who could blame him? He was offered a full scholarship to work on a doctor of ministry. What a great opportunity. This was the first time the church had to face the loss of a pastor. And change is scary. What would they do now? What would the future hold? Everything was sort of predicated on Jeff being here. During this period, I had become a Presbyterian pastor and was on staff at Central Kitsap Presbyterian Church, actually taking Jeff's place. And I had preached for Jeff up here in Poulsbo on a few occasions while he was away, so the congregation here asked if I would come up for the summer to preach to them, to be here for them while they decided what to do. This proved to be the second Kiaros moment for North Point. The North Point Steering Committee, which had been appointed by the Silverdale session, made 3 key decisions during that summer. The first, they asked if I would become the permanent campus pastor up here. I said to them, no, you need to find someone younger. They said, no, we want you. That was very wonderful. We loved Poulsbo, and it was unexpected. The Silverdale session gave their permission. The North Point congregation voted their approval, and so I followed Jeff as the second pastor at North Point. A second key decision by the steering committee was to organize as a separate church of the Seattle Presbytery and no longer continue to be an extension of the Silverdale Church. So we went through the process, and I was installed then as the organizing pastor by the Seattle Presbytery. And thirdly, the congregation decided that they did not want to continue renting worship space forever, but would like to build a new church on this property directly across the street from North Kitsap High School. In this way, the congregation would have a visible presence at a key location in Poulsbo. And the community would be able to see that we were investing in them, that we were here to stay, that we really cared enough about this community and our place here, that we were willing to sacrifice to make this possible. So these 3 decisions defined North Point's second Kiaros moment. And as with the first Kiaros moment, this one arose in response to a desire to grow the kingdom, and it came with a great challenge. This time, the challenge involved, first of all, taking full responsibility for our ministry and not depending anymore on Central Kitsap Presbyterian Church. It was like moving out of our parents' basement and living on our own. We had to elect our own session, establish our own budget and payroll, take responsibility for all of the legal and fiscal responsibilities of a chartered Presbyterian congregation. And then there was the biggest challenge of all. We faced the need to raise a significant amount of money to build a church. It was a big undertaking for a small congregation. Now, as a pastor, I had led 2 previous church building programs, in addition to previously serving as a stewardship consultant to 7 other congregations around the United States wanting to raise money for church construction. So I had seen over and over again what God could do when people with generous hearts responded to a great challenge to grow his kingdom. Nevertheless, this challenge was significant. We called our capital campaign then New Horizons. Some of you remember that. I'd expressed our desire to move beyond what we had done thus far and to see a broader, growing ministry ahead in Poulsbo. Our generous fundraising consultant told us that we could expect to raise up to $400,000 over and above our annual giving to the budget if the congregation was committed to the vision of building a church. And so we did then what we're doing now. We committed ourselves to the next step of the journey at North Point. We set out over several weeks to remind ourselves of the meaning of biblical stewardship, to pray for guidance, to talk within our families, and prepare ourselves to trust God by making a generous financial commitment over and above our regular giving, each as we were able. And our challenge was to be, then as it will be now, not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice. This understood that every family should discover what sacrifice meant to them, given their personal circumstances. In this way, everyone could participate on an equal basis. Not, this is our goal, if every family gives this much, we can achieve the goal, because that would be very disheartening for many who simply could not afford that big of a part, and they would feel discouraged and not be able to participate. But on the other hand, it would be way too little for other people of means, for whom making that commitment wouldn't even be a blip on their radar. And so we realized that calling for equal gifts was wrong for many reasons, but equal sacrifice was something that could be meaningful for every single family. So everyone could participate on an equal basis. The basis of sacrifice, whether well-to-do or low income, whether giving from accumulated assets or pledging an amount based on monthly income. Because God knows our circumstances, doesn't He? He knows our hearts. And when He sees people with hearts of generosity, no matter what their ability to give may be, when He sees people trusting Him by sacrificially giving what they are able to kingdom work, God is pleased. And He says to us through the prophet Malachi, if you bring your tithes and offerings to me and trust me for what you need, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. So we tried it. We put God to the test. And the response was beyond the most optimistic feelings that any of us had imagined. The congregation pledged over $900,000, more than twice what we had been told would be a successful campaign. It was electric. We rejoiced at God's faithfulness and at the generosity of the congregation. And this unexpected response enabled us to move forward right away to build this church. But as we moved forward, God then tested us further as we faced two things. The financial crisis, you may remember, of 2008, when banks stopped loaning money to building projects. And secondly, when our builder faced a serious health crisis. But in God's time, those crises were resolved. The project began and was completed on time, under budget. It's a miracle. But again, a demonstration of good stewardship. So then, since that time, as we've made the move, North Point has wrestled with the important question of ministry that every congregation has to wrestle with, determining among all of the fine churches of Poulsbo, what is our unique calling from God? Since no congregation can be everything for all people, where do we fit? What are our strengths and weaknesses? How can we serve our community and beyond? Among the things that we discovered is that we excel in hospitality. We really are a welcoming congregation. Everybody tells me that in the membership class. That's the first thing they notice. And that's because you are loving people and have welcomed people just as they are, no matter who they are or what they look like, how they're dressed, whatever. You are also, we discovered, a generous congregation. that whenever a need would arise, you would respond. You are a community that excels in community service. Whether at Fishline or volunteering here and there, all over the place, there's North Point people doing stuff. You care for one another through prayer and friendship, just like you have for Joy and Anna in our family. I know you do that for each other. And we excel in providing quality Christian education for our children and in our youth. And we aspire to be intergenerational in our ministries. We also aspire to be international. We formed long-term supportive friendships with 2 congregations in South Africa and with an anti-trafficking ministry, the Freedom Project in India. And we love to worship. We appreciate beautiful music, and we appreciate forms of art. We have reached out to artists in our community who have displayed their art in our foyer so that we could encourage them and get to know them. We love to share our building with the community and other parachurch organizations. Throughout the week, there's organizations using our facilities, and they're so appreciative because it's hard to find space in Poulsbo. And though there are several large and effective ministries to youth in Poulsbo, we have found ways to express our love for youth through student lunches. And now dream of hosting an after-school work center with mentoring for students, something that the high school has been calling for, something that we're in a perfect position to provide. We've also discovered that there's a lot of people in Kitsap County who need to be intellectually persuaded as well as emotionally moved to believe the gospel and follow Jesus. There are people with doubts, with questions. They're skeptics. They need to have their questions answered. They need to understand the Bible, what it really says, what it's speaking to the world today and to them. In addition, that there are many Christians who hunger to grow in discipleship by knowing the Bible. And for this reason, we have come as a congregation to love theology and to love biblical teaching. And so through these ways of serving in other ways, we have experienced God's blessing. And we've experienced God's faithfulness to North Point each step along the way, especially in these 2 Kiaros moments. Twice when the congregation was faced with a big challenge and opportunity, it has responded with exceptional faith and generosity. And God has been faithful. This should encourage us as we now face a Kiaros moment again at North Point. The challenge to prepare for a new era of ministry with a new leader and new opportunities. Poulsbo, and really all of Kitsap County, is in a dynamic time of growth with new families moving into hundreds of new homes being built all around us. And we have this beautiful church in a fantastic location, and we are respected in the community. And you are a gifted, generous, loving congregation with able leadership. It's a fantastic opportunity for the man or woman of God's choosing to come here. And I believe, I've been praying for months, that person, whoever it is, whoever has it on God's mind, will wake up and realize that this is the calling of God upon their life. What is needed this time, in this Kiaros moment, is to prepare for these opportunities before us by addressing our mortgage debt so that more and more of our annual budget can be designated to ministry and staffing in the years to come. Now think of it this way. When a young family purchases their first home, mortgages become a large part of the family budget. You live carefully and you do without some things to make it work. But that budget it's a big responsibility, but it also means that you have a home. We have a budget because we have a debt because we have a beautiful church to meet in. And that's a blessing. But you have to be a good a manager of money. You have to be willing to sacrifice, because this that we have done is an investment, in our case, in ministry. And as time goes by, we know in a home, when income grows in a family, the mortgage becomes a smaller percentage of the budget, freeing you to do other important things, like take your family to Disneyland, where I wouldn't mind being this week. It's the same with us. We knew that we were taking a big bite when we built the church. We knew that we would need to manage our finances carefully, to work hard and get by with part-time staff and exceptional volunteers while aggressively paying down the mortgage and debentures. And we have. But now, at this third Kiaros moment, we are challenging ourselves to prepare for what's next by taking another deep breath of faith, with a heart full of generosity, to respond to the challenge of paying off a big chunk of that mortgage so that we can free more assets from the budget to ministry. So for the next 4 weeks, I want to challenge all of us to do 3 simple things. First, to focus. Focus on the importance of this moment in our life as a congregation. This is a time, a season to act. Read the materials that we produced. Plan to be present at every worship service during this campaign. And yes, change is coming, and change is always unnerving, but change is also a time for renewal and recommitment to God's calling. And I believe that that is such a time, so we need to focus. Second, pray. Take these weeks to ask the Lord, as a single adult or as a family, what God would have you to do to participate. And remember that the basis of participation, which we'll talk more about, will be equal gifts, not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice. There are lots of different ways for people in various circumstances to do something significant in God's eyes. Ask God to show you, what does sacrifice mean to me or to us? And third, respond with hearts of generosity. That's what this campaign really wants to see happen in the end. Not just for a project, a goal to be met, which is fantastic, but also for this congregation to be even greater in our stewardship. A sacrificial commitment usually means a change of behavior or an adjustment of plans. A sacrificial commitment usually hurts a little bit because it is a spiritual issue. It touches upon our desires, our habits, our spending, our fears, our ambitions. And Jesus was right. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. And so a campaign like this is a revealing campaign. It discloses where our hearts are at, and it can be difficult to struggle with that. So even something as mundane as reducing mortgage debt for a spiritual challenge is a challenge with a prospect of growing our faith, growing our ministry, seeing the power of God at work. Now, as we noted at the beginning, a Kiaros moment is a tipping point, a critical point in a process by which significant change takes place. And we know that's coming. We know this moment has arrived. It's been my experience that God brings about significant change through capital programs such as Hearts of Generosity, not only for the church congregation as a whole, but also for each one of us who focuses on, prays about, and responds with faith to what God is doing. May God bless each one of us in this spiritual challenge in the next 4 weeks. Let's pray. Our Father, Once again, we discover that life is full of adventure, some of which we sought out and some of which we didn't. It's the nature of things in this fallen world to change and for new things to need to come. And in this important moment in our church's life, Father, looking back at all the ways that you've been faithful to us every step along the way, we feel confident that you're going to do that again. And that means, Lord, that you're going to work in our hearts. And so, Lord, we open our heart to you to focus, to pray, to respond. Grant us, Lord, not a grudging submission to pressure, but Lord, grant us a joyful response to your grace, to the amazing privilege of being partners with you in this world, laying the groundwork for the kingdom of God to come in fullness at the end of history, to make you known to a generation that is lost and confused, and to be a blessing to this community that we love. So Lord, go before us, show us your glory, work in our hearts, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.